Welcome back! In this lecture, we're going to set up our project of building a neural network in Godot. Join me in Godot engine. We're going to create a new project. Let's name this our neural network. Then we can select a project path. It's recommended to make a new empty folder on your computer where the project files will be saved. For example, here I created a new folder on my desktop called Neural Network Godot. That's where the project files will be saved. Then we can press Create and Edit, and this is going to launch the Godot game engine. Here it is with the default game, and it's just an empty scene as the default. Next, let's create our first scene. We're going to create a 2D scene with a node 2D as the root node, and we can call the node main. Then let's hit Command or Control S and let's save the scene as main. Then we're going to right click and set that as the main scene. Perfect. Then we're going to write a script in the scene. For that, we go to the inspector, make sure the main scene is selected. We're going to press New Script under the script property here, and we'll create a new script called main.gd for Godot, language being Godot script. Press Create. This is going to launch a default script where we are extending node 2D, inheriting from the 2D node class. We have a ready function called when the node enters the scene tree for the first time. And we also have a process function called every frame like update. Let's start here in the ready function. By default, we're just passing, but what I'm going to do is randomize to reset the randomizer. And next, I want to create a neural network. Now, to create a neural network, I will have to create a neural network class. And for that, I'll need another script, which means I'm going to go into my file system, right click and select new script. And I'm going to call this one neural_network.gd. Then you can double click to pop it open and you'll see it has the same default. All right, so let's here initialize the neural network. I'm going to expand my code window and we're going to just reset everything. So we're going to create a new class name called neural network for this class. In here, I'm going to create a constructor with the init function to initialize objects of this class. I'm going to send in input nodes as an int, as well as hidden nodes as an int, and then output nodes as ints. First thing I'll do is call randomize to reset the randomizer. Then I'm going to create some state variables or class variables for these details about the neural network, and those include the input nodes, as well as the hidden nodes and the output nodes. So we'll declare those at the top of the class. Then inside of the function, we are going to set the values of those variables. So the input nodes gets the input nodes argument from the function. The hidden nodes variable gets the hidden nodes argument sent to the function. And the output nodes gets assigned the value of course, the output nodes passed to the constructor. Next up, we're also going to create the weights and biases needed for my neural network. So these will be some more state variables. We're going to create weights, input hidden, which will be of type matrix. Now, for this to work, we will have to define a new type matrix in a new class. So let's just comment that line out for now. We will have to create our new custom class for a matrix. For this, I'm going to hide my large view and I'm going to create another script. We're going to right click, new script. This script is going to be called matrix. Press enter to create it, and then you can double click to open it and you can expand the code editor. Here we're going to reset the code. We'll create a new class called matrix, and we're going to create a constructor here in the matrix class. And the constructor is going to take in rows as well as columns for the matrix, which is like a tabular or table data structure to store data, as well as a value by default will be 0. We're going to first randomize to reset the random number generator. Then we're going to create some state variables or global variables here in the matrix class. We're going to create rows as well as columns or calls. These will be integers. And then in the constructor, we're going to set rows to get the value sent to the constructor, as well as columns to get the value sent to the constructor. We're also going to store the data of the matrix as a list or array. Those are all the values that will be in the table. We're going to loop for every row in range of 0 up to the rows. We're going to grab data and insert into it the row and an empty array. Then for every column in a range of 0 up to the number of columns, we're going to take the data at the current row and insert the value. This way we'll have this tabular structure. Okay, so now we have matrix type defined, which means back in the neural network, we can now use it. We will not have any error messages for now. All right, so we can create weights input hidden as well. I'm going to create my weights output hidden, and this will be the matrix. So we will need weights for the input and our output equations. Same thing, we're going to need a bias of type matrix as well as a bias for the output. So we'll have bias hidden and we will have bias output. All of these are matrices. Then we're going to initialize these inside of the neural network constructor. For that, we will have to create another function in our matrix. And that will be a function to create a matrix with random values, because the weights and biases should start at a random point. So we'll have to go back to the matrix class here. And in here, we're going to create a new method or function. So let's create a static function so it can be accessed throughout the project for simplicity's sake. And we'll call this generate random matrix. This will take in some matrix structure. It's going to return a matrix. And first we're going to reset the random number generator. Then we're going to get a result by calling getClass.new on matrix.rows and matrix.columns. So we are going to get the class, current class's matrix, and create a new object from it. And that will give us our result. Now for this to work, we have to get our class. So we have to create this function, helper function. This will be a static function, get class. For now, if you do see that get class is not found in base ref, then we'll return, we need to load the resource of the location of our matrix file, which in our case is just in the root folder. Okay, so we have our result in generate random matrix, but then we have to populate it. So we're going to loop for every row in range of 0 up to result.rows. Then for every column in range of 0 up to result.columns, we're going to set result.data at the row and the column, because this is a matrix, to use the random float range function to select a random float between -1 and +1. Then make sure you're outside of the loops with your indentation. You're going to return the result. So now we have this function to generate a random matrix, and we're going to put that to use in our neural network file. Here in the constructor, when we set the weights input hidden value, we're going to use matrix.generate random matrix function. Call matrix.new with the hidden nodes and the input nodes as the two arguments for that function, and then the constructor. Because in matrix, we have the constructor, which asks for rows and columns, and value is optional. And then we have generate random matrix, which asks for a matrix. So that will allow us to create the weights input. And similarly, we can create our weights input, or weights output rather, weights. And we have here output hidden. Just make sure you spell it correctly at the top there. Okay, and that is going to be matrix.generate random matrix again. It's matrix.new, but this time, careful here, we're going to use the output nodes and then the hidden nodes. Perfect. And similarly, we are going to initialize the values of the bias. So the bias hidden will be using matrix.generate random matrix, matrix.new on our hidden nodes, and 1 for the rows and columns. And then for the bias output, I'm going to use matrix.generate random matrix with matrix.new, but this time for the output nodes as the rows and 1 as the columns. We can test running the project for now. All right, so we don't have any pressing error messages or issues. That's good. You can check if you have any errors, like delta is never used for process. That's just a warning, as it is yellow. Okay, so we have set up partially the matrix and the neural network. Coming up next, we're going to continue building out the neural network. We will need things like a learning rate activation function built in there. We'll also have to define how the model can train and how the model can make predictions. Thanks for watching, and let's continue the project, continue building our network in the next lecture.